Greetings, this is Juno, and welcome to the character and class overview. There are a few things that I want to note before we start. One, I will only be going over class 1, 2, and 3. I will not be going over class 4. The reasons being is 1, the class 4 is post-game, and 2, the class 4 is pretty much supplementary to your class 2 and 3. Whereas class 2 and 3 are very much build defining, whereas 4 is not. Second, I will be skimming over most of the characters' passives and abilities. The reason being, if I went through all of them in great detail, we would be here pretty much forever. So to make this video as brief as possible. So I'll note a few of them that I find notable. Maybe in the future I'll make a video to go in more detail of each ability and every other little small aspect of each character. If you wish to see an overview of a certain character, feel free to use the timestamps in the description. So there are just a few more things left for us to note before we start with our first character. Let's have a quick overview of how the 5 stats work in this game. There's strength that increases physical attack, stamina that increases health and physical defense, intellect that increases magic defense and magic attack with some exceptions, spirit that increases the amount that you can heal from healing spells, and lastly, there's luck that increases crit chance of getting rare items from enemy drops, and affects some of Hawkeye's magic damage on some of his spells. It should also be noted that there's 3 factions in the game, and the final faction that you face is dependent on who your main character is. If you chose Duran or Angela, it will be the Crimson Wizard and his master. If you chose Kevin or Charlotte, it will be Gormon and his master. Lastly, if you chose Hawkeye or Riesz, it will be Isabella and her master. Finally, it's kind of a rule of thumb to not have overlapping spells or abilities. For example, having a Dark Duran and a Light Charlotte being invested into sabers, or a Dark Riesz and a Dark Hawkeye being invested into debuffs. But that's enough introduction. On to our first character, which is...
I'm a soldier from Volsena. The name's Duran.
While Duran could be a decent healer with enough investment and is a decent support with his sabers, what he truly excels at is doing physical damage and being a quote-unquote tank. And by that, I wouldn't mean that he would just stand there and take the damage. In this game, it's by far best to just evade away from attacks and just not take the damage at all. What I mean by that, he has the ability to take the aggro onto himself, giving his allies breathing room with the ability Provoke, which he can learn super early on with just 4 points into luck. Now, how I would recommend you to allocate Duran's training points is, if you're going DPS, go Strength and Luck should be a pretty high priority. Spirit if you are going with sabers. Stamina is always good along the board, but shouldn't be at the highest priority. And then Intellect is pretty low. The only reason I've ever seen to take Intellect with Duran is maybe Guard Saber, and that's just kind of stretching it. Now, the 2 choices that Duran has with his class 2, you either go Knight or Gladiator. The Knight class gets better defenses, as well as being the only path where Duran gets Heal Light, whereas Gladiator gets better physical damage and gets access to the 4 basic elemental sabers. Now on to Duran's class 3s. If you chose a Knight, you have to decide between a Paladin or a Liege. Paladin gets better defenses as well as gets the ability Holy Saber, whereas Liege gets slightly better physical damage and gains access to party healing. If you chose a Gladiator, you have to choose between an Adolfre or a Duelist. Duelist is Duran's highest raw physical damage class, as well as learns the ability Dark Saber, whereas Adolfre gives up some damage to get the ability to do multi-targeting sabers, as well as being the only class that learns both Leaf Saber and Moon Saber at the same time, which only Kevin learns Leaf Saber or Moon Saber and not at the same time. I also have no freaking clue what Mastery does as a passive. I've tested attack damage, attack speed. I still don't know what it means by weapon efficiency.
I'm Angela, Princess of Altena.
Now on to Angela. No matter where you take Angela, she's always going to be a magic user. It just depends on where you take her, either if you want her to do specialize into area effect damage, single target damage, or some status / crowd control. It should also be noted that Angela is very weak in the beginning of the game due to not having access to her spells, due to the fact that it requires you to find the elemental spirits for certain spells, and she will go through a good portion of the game without most of her spells. Now my recommendations for stat priority for Angela. Intelligence and spirit should be a pretty high priority depending on if you want what spells you want. Luck should also be a pretty high priority. Stamina is always good no matter what, but should be like your third priority or less. And then strength should be a pretty low priority, but only like really invest into strength if you want the fire spells. Now with Angela's class 2, you have the choice between a sorceress and a mysticist. Sorceress is the first one to learn the mid-power level elemental spells, as well as learn Lucid Beam. And later on, with her class 3s, she gets better at using area effect spells. Whereas Mysticist gets Wound Magic and learns Dark Force. Generally, I feel between the both of them that Mysticist is severely lacking compared to Sorceress. But the later on class 3s with the Dark Path of Angela are really good at doing single target damage. Now on to Angela's class 3. If you chose Sorceress, you get to choose between Grand Diviner or Archmage, where both give very powerful area effect spells, where Grand Diviner is better at sustain due to its passive called Refresh, whereas Archmage gets better damage with less sustain. Both also get really powerful ultimate spells that do non-elemental damage, though generally are good, but I feel like for the most part I don't use them too much due to their casting time. Now if you made it past the weaker Mysticist, you get to choose between Runeseer or Magus. Runeseer gets the most powerful basic elemental spells, as well as those spells have a chance of doing different status effects on your enemy. And then she also gets the ultimate spell known as Annihilate, which has a chance of insta-killing some enemies. Whereas Magus gets a risky playstyle with Wound Magic All, being able to do high amounts of single target damage, as well as getting the most powerful ultimate spell that Angela has, known as Ancient Curse.
Kevin! That's me!
Next up is Kevin, which is a physical powerhouse with very light amounts of support abilities. I would say that Kevin is the least flexible character out of the 6. You're pretty much always going to bring him to be a physical powerhouse, nothing much else. Pretty much with Kevin, the stats that I would recommend prioritizing would be strength and luck. Stamina wouldn't be too bad. Invest into spirit only if you want to get or nature aura or moon energy or a saber, and don't even bother with intellect. With Kevin's choices of class 2, it's monk or brawler. With brawler, it's the superior physical damage dealer, whereas monk gives up some damage to gain access to healing. Now with Kevin's class 3, if you chose monk, you get to choose between Divine Fist or Warrior Monk. Divine Fist specializes in class strikes with its abilities and especially its spell Nature's Aura, whereas Warrior Monk gets party healing as well as Leaf Saber. If you chose Brawler, you get to choose between Enlightened or Fatal Fist. Enlightened is better defensively as well as gains access to Moon Saber, whereas Fatal Fist gets higher physical damage and moon energy.
I'm Charlotte, resident beauty of Wendell.
With Charlotte, she can summon, she can buff with sabers, and she can even debuff with one of her classes. But by far what she does the best is healing. She learns both Heal Light and Twinkle Rain at Class 1. Though the worst con of her character is that she is the biggest uwu ever, but as long as you can deal with her speech impediment, she is really fucking good for being a heal support. With the stats that I would recommend to prioritize with Charlotte would be Spirit. Every single spell that she learns, no matter what class, is based on Spirit. Now after that, it would either depend if you want to go DPS with summons or if you want to go with support. If you go with DPS with summons, probably luck and intellect. If you do support, go between stamina or intellect. And of course, don't even bother with strength. Now with Charlotte's class 2, you have the choice between Priestess or Enchantress. Priestess is better at healing as well as getting some of the elemental sabers. Enchantress gives up some of its healing power to get summons. Now with Charlotte's class 3, if you chose a Priestess, you get to choose between a High Cleric or a Sage. High Cleric is one of the best support classes in the game, with having some of the best healing, as well as Holy Saber and Magic Shield. Whereas Sage gives up some of its healing power compared to a High Cleric to be able to use Team Elemental Sabers, as well as even getting the spell Lucent Beam. Now if you chose an Enchantress, you get to choose between a Necromancer or a Warlock. Necromancer does more summon damage due to its passive, as well as gets the spell Dark Curse, which debuffs all stats, and then Dark Saber. Whereas Warlock is good at lowering enemy stats through abilities, as well as through Putrid Breath.
The name's Hawkeye, renowned thief from Navarre.
Now we are on to Hawkeye, which I find to be one of the most versatile characters in the game. You pretty much build him any way. You could build him as a physical damage dealer, you could build him as a magic damage dealer. He even has like specific support abilities and spells that are exclusive to him. Now with the recommended stat priority section, it gets a little complicated. It very much depends on where you want to take him. If you want to make him into a physical damage dealer, you'd want to go with strength and luck. Probably go into luck first due to some of his abilities that he gets. If you wish to make him into a support and go down his nomad tree, be sure to invest into Spirit to get some of his exclusive support abilities. Here's where things get a little complicated. If you make him in a magic damage dealer, all of his trap abilities, which are posted here, and all of his rogue abilities, damage is based on luck instead of intellect. Every other ability though, in every other class, it's based on intellect. With Hawkeye's class 2, you choose between Ranger or Ninja. Ranger gets a few trap spells as well as a few status spells. Ninjas learn Nujutsus, which are magic damaging spells that debuff. On to class 3. If you chose a Ranger, you get to choose between a Nomad and a Rogue. Nomads gain exclusive support magic that no other class gets, such as Crystalline, Wall, Lunar Radiance, etc. Whereas Rogue is a luck-based magic dealer. Now if you chose a Ninja, your choices are between Ninja Master and Nightblade. Ninja Master specializes in area effect ninjutsus, whereas Nightblade specializes into status effect spells, as well as learns the most powerful dark spell in the game, which is Dark Rain, as well as probably one of the best passives, which is Cutthroat, which has a chance of insta-killing any enemy inflicted by a status ailment.
I am Riesz. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Last but not least, we have Riesz, which she does well with being a support within either buffs or debuffs, as well as all of her class 3 gets a massive summon of some sort. For stat recommendations for Riesz, Spirit should be a pretty high priority due to it unlocking buffs and debuffs. Intellect may also be a high priority due to the heavy investment needed to get Riesz's summons. With every other stat, it very much varies depending on what you need for your team. With Riesz's class 2, you have the choice between a Valkyrie or a Rune Maiden. Valkyrie gains buffing spells, whereas Rune Maiden gains debuffing spells. On to Riesz's class 3. If you chose a Valkyrie, you get to choose between a Vanadis or a Star Lancer. Vanadis is the more defensive of the two. She also gets the spell Freya, which I find to be the worst of Riesz's summons due to it turning the enemies into level 1s. I've had many times where the AI would turn the enemies into level 1s where I've almost killed them, where I didn't want them to be turned. Whereas Star Lancer upgrades her buffs into party buffs and has no time limit on her buffs. She also gets the Summon Seraph, which does pretty good damage and can silence enemies. Now if you chose Rune Maiden, you have the choice between a Dragon Master and a Fenrir Knight. With Dragon Master, I find it to be the best physical damage dealer class for Riesz, though she also gets a pretty powerful summon known as Jolingander that can poison enemies. Finally, there's a Fenrir Knight, which gets group debuffing, as well as Hexus that does the highest raw damage out of any of the summons. And so ends my overview of all the characters in Trials of Mana. I hope this is helpful in forming a party for you. If you feel like you don't have certain things in your party, feel free to go to the Bezel Black Market to gain certain items that your party lacks. Now if you would do those YouTube things, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Now have a good day.